All right, gather everybody. Here we are. Okay. Shalom, shalom for everybody. Welcome. Okay. I'm going to put everybody on mute and you can reserve your questions for later. Okay, we're going to be beginning. We're still continuing and almost finishing, not too far from the end, in the book The Shadow of the Ladder by Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag, translated by Mark and Edita Cohen, who was able to do this incredible text. So let's just recap a little bit on what we're discovering here. The main theme that he's been talking about all along was that you can't experience a revelation unless there's a concealment, right? That's the big law. The cosmic law is if you are born in the light the whole time, right? You're so used to the light and you take the light for so granted, you cannot appreciate the light, right? A lot of people born and raised in America don't really appreciate the country they live in and the type of lifestyle, okay? And if you would like to have a little bit of a concealment segment in your life, you can come to Israel and go grocery shopping, okay? And then you'll really appreciate the Krogers, the Randalls, and everything else, okay? And the H-E-B. You have to bag your own groceries here, just to let you know that. It's also like California where you should bring your own bags, and if you don't, they charge you for the bags. Okay. In any case, the spiritual law is you need concealment before you have revelation. In other words, God created darkness, and the darkness we have to experience in order to appreciate light, because we know that God made us for a purpose. The purpose is God made a creation in order to bestow pleasure, right? Bottom line, bestow pleasure to another. That is the purpose of creation. But if that creation was constantly bathing in this pleasure, it would get used to it, take it for granted. So there has to be this concept, what we call darkness, or you will call it also exile. Darkness and exile are very much synonymous in all of the holy writings. So the idea here is that God, as he made his creation and withdrew himself in order that there be something else exist outside of him, that's called concealment. He had to conceal himself, right? And that's in a series of degradations that we touched upon last week. They're the highest realms, closest to the light of the infinite, the Ein Sof, called Atzilut. And then you have the next one, well, that's called nearness or emanation. And then you'll have Bria, creation. Then you'll have Yetzira, formation. And then you'll have Asiya, our realm here. So we learned that in order to appreciate God in the most amazing way, we have to go down in order to go up, okay? Our souls, even though they came from such a high place, there was a lack of some degree that they had to come into this world and go through it in order to come out with the proper garments, in order to have the proper relationship, okay, with God. So the idea here is our realm is the realm of ultimate concealment. It's very hard to see God. It's very hard to see God's providence. And that's what it was when Moshe Rabbeinu was debating with the angels in heaven, that they're going like, the Torah doesn't belong there. So Moshe quoted all of the 10 Commandments going, honor your mother and father. You guys got a mother and father? No, we don't have a mother and father. Right? You guys got an evil inclination? No, we don't have an evil inclination. You guys, right? So basically it came down to the Torah needs to be coming from this place of concealment. And we've also been learning that there are levels of Torah, when you take away the concealment, that really belong to what we'll call the higher realms, or the higher dimensions, the world of formation, creation, and nearness. Those are higher. But really, we know that it's all one Torah. Okay? But the Torah became more concealed down here in order for us to come here, break through it, in order to achieve the connection and the revelation of what the Torah really is and what it's supposed to be giving us. Okay? So that's where we got to last time, that you can have different kinds of people studying the Torah different ways. You can have people who are learning the Torah, only the revealed Torah. They'll say, I can't. No, don't give me any of that Kabbalah stuff. It's enough that we just have the revealed Torah, right? So that's going to be a problem, because the idea here is attitude. And the attitude has to be with a sense of direction of where am I going. That means I want to touch upon the higher Torah, what we'll call the Torah that's undressed. So I want to reveal the parts of the Torah that I'm experiencing in order that I can partake of the higher Torah. It's all the same Torah, except you just want it undressed, okay? So we learn basically that what is the wisdom of the Kabbalah? The wisdom of the Kabbalah is all of the Torah when it's in the realm of Atzilut and Bria and Yetzirah, okay? That's called the Kabbalah. And then our realm is called the revealed parts. So that's where we left off last time, and we're on page 193, paragraph 147. So he starts off, in order to understand this better, I will give you a practical example. As long as the person is in the state of concealment of God's face, the letters and garments of the Torah conceal God. So in other words, you'll look at a Torah, it's a book, it's a great book, it's great stuff, but there's still a ultimate concealing of what God, of the light of the infinite. The same Torah letters you have down here are the same letters up there. The idea here is, what state is the person in? Are you in a state of concealment of God's face? And you're okay with it? Or are you working for a higher understanding or a higher connection? So here he says, as a consequence of being in this state of the concealment of God's face, Hester Panim, we say, the person inevitably stumbles into sin. Because what's the idea? They really are not grasping the total idea of the Torah, the total idea of what God wants, the total idea of what it means to connect to God. You could learn Torah, you could practice mitzvahs and be in the dark all your life. You could be doing things by rote, right, out of habit, and nothing really, and you just go through your motions, and you go through your whole emotions, and you never come out to being an enlightened person. So eventually this person, because of their limited ideology of what God is like we talked about last week, Rabbi Nachman meets the atheist, and the atheist says, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in God. And Rabbi Nachman says to him, the same God that you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. That's a very profound idea. The same, because people are believing in a kind of, if they're looking at the letters and the Torah in the form that we have it in our realm, it comes out, God is very, vengeful, angry, always punishing, right? And it's very harsh to have that kind of relationship with God. So the idea here is, Rabbi Nachman says, the same God that you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. So a person, if he learns Torah in this state, even though he's learning, he's definitely going to come to stumble to sin, because his emunah, his faith, is verkrumt. Verkrumt means messed up, okay? Limited, okay? Then, the person comes up against the proper consequences of their acts, and they have to deal with the coarse garments of the Torah. This is an interesting idea. Have to deal with the coarse garments of the Torah. Kind of like what I just shared with you now, And here he brings down the examples of, let's say, the experiences of something unclean, the experience of something forbidden, the experience of something defective, or such the like. There's a great parable. Because most people, they really don't understand what the Torah is. They think or Judaism is a religion, a race, both, that plus. There was a great parable that I read in a Stephen Covey book. I think it was called First Things First. And in any case, I wouldn't repeat it to you if there was a rabbi of a synagogue didn't use it for his Yom Kippur sermon. It was a great, I'm like, he said it, and I'm like, that comes from that book. Anyways, the story goes that they were doing some maneuvers. The Navy, the U.S. Navy was doing maneuvers somewhere off the coast of Alaska or somewhere. And there they are, they're all got their ships in place, and it's the night. And of course, what happens in the one battleship, the navigation says to the captain, it says, we spot there's a ship up above, it's starboard, 10 degrees. And it's an unchartered ship, it shouldn't be there, right? Because it's not part of our war games that we're playing. And the captain says, signal to that ship that they have to move because we're on a collision course and they have to move, right? And then they get a signal back from that ship saying, no, you move, right? People probably are familiar with the story. And then the captain says, you tell them to move. And then they get an answer back, you move. And then that's the captain is already annoyed. And he says, you signal to them that I am a battleship and they should move. And then they get the signal back. Who knows the punchline? I am a lighthouse, you move. Okay? So what's the idea there? Okay? People think that, we're all ships out in the sea. King David always mentions that all the time. We're all ships out in the sea and we're sailing or navigating, and we might feel that, yes, we have the force of the battleship, but you know something? There are rocks out there. There are icebergs out there. The Torah is a technology of the soul. That means if you veer off being out of alignment with the 613 mitzvahs, that means you're going to crash against the rocks. You're going to deal with a consequence. It's going to be a reality, right? A lot of people, there's a famous psalm, not a psalm, it's a proverb from King Sulam. It says, how does it go? Many courses man takes and falls, and they blame it on God, and they get mad at God, okay? In other words, man takes certain courses, and he thinks he can go wherever he wants, and then, of course, he falls and stumbles, and then he gets mad at God. It's not God's fault, okay? There's a lot about us and our role in this creation, which is upon us to take responsibility for. So, but here, we're looking at the individual who is in a state of concealment. He doesn't see God, not so much. Or the level of God, his level of understanding of God is very limited. And so being in limited, he's going to make mistakes. He's going to fall. He's going to do all kinds of sins. He's going to crash on rocks here and icebergs there. It's going to happen. Those are called the coarse garments of the Torah. However, going on, when the person becomes worthy of the revelation of God's providence and the transformation from love of God, then all their arrogant acts are changed into virtues. All the sins and mistakes through which the person stumbled during the time when he or she lived under the concealment of God's face are now stripped from their coarse and extremely bitter garments and are now dressed in garments of light, mitzvot, and merits. For it is these very same coarse garments themselves which are transformed into virtues. In other words, through the person's powers of perception, and it does have to do with perception. How do you perceive God? That then, only then can you start to perceive what happens to you in a different light. And then it happens that will give birth to all of the mistakes that you might have made actually turn out to be amazing, wondrous things. Yes, even though they seem like they're mistakes now. That all of those mistakes or sins of the past becomes sources of light and sources of pleasure. Okay? The idea here is you could shift. You could have that perception for a few times a day. Okay? The idea here is to have it where it's fixed. This state of consciousness. Okay? Where we're looking for God. And I think the factor here is, and I was looking at this, I'm like, wow, how does this work? Going from concealment to revealing, concealing, revealing, concealing, revealing. And it all starts with our perception, but the willingness to try to jump to see a higher picture. Okay? And only until you see that and you merit to know that God is in charge of your life completely. Every single detail is totally orchestrated. I go to the post office, you take a number. It's not like the post office in America, okay? The post office is about as big as half the size of your garage, okay? You have to wait outside. There's about 30 people take a number till your number's called. And of course, we were waiting about half an hour. Of course, we wait, we get up there, and we waited for nothing. Okay, because they don't have what we wanted. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Hashem. Okay? Once of those, I got to always throw these tidbits because, it's like a 100-pound weight for me. Okay? So, in any case, until the person merits to do tshuva, until the person affects his attitude, am I seeking to see God, or am I going to be in a state of concealment? That is the thought. Okay? Like I said last week, Rabbi Eli Mansour would go around his table, his Shabbos table, and go, who wants to share where they saw God this week? And all the kids would get very excited, and they would all go, yeah, I was here, I crossed the street, and then, whatever it is, they had all the little stories of where they saw God in their lives. Are you a seeker or not a seeker? That's the whole defining factor here, okay? Going on. These people who have come into the enlightened state, they now have the aspect of garments that stem from the worlds of Atzilut and Bria, or where they do not hide or conceal the teacher, may he be blessed. On the contrary, and your eyes will see your teacher becomes a reality. In other words, it's got to be so fixed in your soul, so deep that this is coming from God, and it's for the absolute best. And you don't have to see the best at that time, but you just have to come from the place of, I'm only interested in seeing the Torah of Atzilut or the Torah of Bria. I'm connected to that. It must again be emphasized that there is no difference between the Torah of Atzilut and the Torah of this world, between the wisdom of the Kabbalah and the revealed Torah. Don't ever think that it's different. Thank you, God, for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Hashkacha story last week. We went away up north. I wasn't planning on going. I was planning on going up north, but we were by the coast, by Naharia, visiting my brother-in-law, and spent there a little time, and we had to come back because our lift came, and we had to be there the next day. So we were heading back, and we go, let's go to Pekin. Pekin is a place where is the cave where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar were in for 13 years. The actual cave, there's a carob tree right outside it. We'll go there. So we go there, great. And then we get a phone call that my wife's brother is in Tveria having dinner, and they're heading to where the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is, Maron. Okay? So we're with my mother-in-law. If we meet them in Maron, they'll take my mother-in-law to Jerusalem, and I don't have to make the extra stop to Jerusalem. It will save me about an hour and a half driving when I go back. Great. Okay, we're going to go to Maron. We go to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that's in Maron. Another about a 45-minute drive from there. Great. Awesome. And then what happens is, of course, my brothers-in-law, the ones in Tveria who are having dinner, they decided they're not going to Meron. Okay, so I got to bring, thank God, my mother-in-law to Jerusalem. Anyways, no, but that's not the point. The point was, Shimon Bar Yochai, I don't know, there's something about it to go to his grave. I just needed to go, I guess. So Hashgacha led me, God led me, once again to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who I happen to learn Tikkunei Zohar every day. All right, so that's the Torah of Atzilut. That's why I'm talking about Shimon Bar Yochai, the Torah of Atzilut. In other words, the same letters, the same words, but they have a deeper meaning, okay? So again, that paragraph. It must again be emphasized that there's no difference between the Torah of Atzilut and the Torah of this world. Between the wisdom of the Kabbalah and the revealed Torah. No difference. The only distinction lies in the what? Perspective of the person who is studying it. Okay? In other words, do you know that there are deeper layers? You have to know that there are deeper layers. And not only that, it's not enough to know it, because I know a lot of people who know it, and they go, yeah, there's deeper layers, but it's not for me. It's not for me. No. Okay? The idea here is, I'm going to get to those deeper layers, because that is where God really wants you to go. He wants you to experience the concealment, but only for the purpose of getting beyond the concealment, of getting to the revelation. The only distinction lies in the perspective of the person who's studying it. Both deal with exactly the same principles and the same language, same words. Nevertheless, one will experience the Torah from the point of the view of the wisdom of the Kabbalah, the Torah of Atzilut, and the other will experience the Torah as revealed Torah, the Torah of Asiyah, for good or for better, and understand this well. Okay? So the question is, which part do you want to connect to? Okay? In the light of this, now we can understand how wise were the remarks of the Vilna Gaon, who wrote that when studying Torah, we should usually first engage with the most hidden aspect. Okay? So we were understanding this, we learned this a few classes ago, that the Vilna Gaon, it seemed to indicate, the Vilna Gaon says, you have to study Sod first. You have to study the hidden part first, and then work your way to Pshat. But here he's going to bring us a completely different understanding, which will give us an appreciation to where we are. And that is to say, here, of course, everything that we've been discussing, that we study the revealed Torah of Asiyah, our world, in which God is completely hidden. That's what he meant by you have to study the hidden aspect, meaning the stuff that looks tough, okay? Really concealed, okay? That's what he called hidden. Next, we study the level of remez, hint, in which God is a little bit more revealed. And this is the Torah of Yetzirah. Eventually a person comes to the Torah in its simple meaning. Pshat. Usually most people understand Pshat as the simple meaning, meaning the Torah of Asiyah, the lowest realm. No. Here he calls Pshat the Torah of Atzilut, the highest. Why? Because that's called nit pashet. Pashet means it's stripped. It's stripped of all of the garments, and you get the real light of the wisdom of what's behind the letters. You connect to the real energy of the Torah for what it's supposed to do and what it's supposed to be giving us and how we're supposed to be connecting to God through the Torah. So eventually a person comes to its simple meaning, and this is the Torah of Atzilut, which is here called the simple meaning of the Torah. This is also because at this level, all garments that conceal God are removed, and he says, hit pashet, there's no more garments anymore. I mean, maybe there's got to be some kind of garment, because otherwise you zap back into infinity. So there's got to be some kind of garment which keeps us a creation, and so God, we can have a relationship with God, because the whole point of the Torah is what? About what? That nasty four-letter word? Relationship. That's right. Relationship. Okay. Okay, so in other words, basically, we're here. It's okay that we don't understand the concealed part of the Torah. It's okay. But what he's giving us here is the keys to knowing I can hardly wait to see the deeper meanings behind all of these verses. And it is available to us now more than ever. Thank God. Okay? There's more Kabbalah study out there. Some of it's kosher. A lot of it's kosher, but some of it's not kosher. But in any case, we see that it is out there in such a way that people can grasp it. People can have a connection to it. And people can finally taste the real God of light when it's not in the garments that we experience. Okay? And now we can come to the understanding of the four holy worlds, which are known in the wisdom of the Kabbalah that we've been discussing. Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, right? That we call those emanation, creation, formation, and making. And this is where we got to give you a new insight for today. The four worlds of Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, of uncleanliness, of Tuma, which are arranged as two frameworks, each opposed to the other. Here we're getting an introduction. Okay? Welcome to the Ma'arechet HaKlipa, the system of the shells, of the husks. Okay? Now, the way God made creation, he made this one corresponding this one. Okay? What does it mean, this one corresponding this one? Just like the levels we have of holiness and Kedusha, we also have the same things by unholiness and darkness. They always have to be hand in hand and corresponding each other. I'll give you the greatest example from the Talmud in Sanhedrin. And in the Talmud in Sanhedrin, the people there at the time, we don't understand it in our situation. In our day and age, we don't understand. But back then, everybody was worshiping idols. It was, I would call it, my father-in-law called it spiritual pornography. Everybody was completely addicted. Elijah the prophet said, if there were 15,000 Jews in all of Israel that didn't worship the Baal, in other words, everybody was so totally steeped in it. It was that grasping, it was holding. And so the sages says, we got to stop this. And they had the holy temple. They had the sacrifices, the Kohanim, the priest, everything was... But they go, we got to stop this idolatry. Everybody's running after idolatry. And so they prayed and fasted and for 3 days. And 3 days later, what happened? A fiery whelp came darting out of the Holy of Holies. A whelp is a baby cub lion. All of a sudden, here the priests are doing their thing. All of a sudden, some weird, fiery little baby cub comes shooting. Now this is like, I guess you have to put this in words for more or less that we can understand, okay? And that's the words that they're handing down. So here all of a sudden comes darting out of the Holy of Holies this entity or this energy, and they don't know what to do with it. Finally, they grab a big vessel because it's going, okay? So finally they grab this vessel and cover it, right? And then they get Big Bubba Cohen to sit on it, and he's sitting on it, bumping a little bit, right? And they go get the rabbis. So they go get the rabbis, and the rabbis go, lo and behold, it has been delivered to us, the evil inclination for idolatry, and now we can kill it. But they sat on a debate for it. They had to debate because you know why? Because they knew that if they knock out the evil inclination for idolatry, they would also not have prophecy anymore. It would obliterate holy prophecy. And we wouldn't have it. So they decided to do it. But the idea here is, Zulumat Zu Asalukim, God made this one corresponding this one. Just as there is this like unbelievable captive energy of idolatry, there was also in the form of holiness on the same spiritual level, the source of the Holy of Holies, of prophecy. They knew they were going to destroy, and they destroyed the evil inclination for idolatry, and also prophecy went out. Classic prophecy was gone. Okay? We got a lot of guys today who think that they're prophets, right? But no, okay? So the idea, the concept is this one corresponding this one. Just like there's a marechet, there's a system of holiness, there's a hierarchy, a way to climb to Kedusha. There's also, because God had to make everything equal. God had to make everything balanced. There has to be balance in this world. So God had to make also a corresponding stature, a corresponding levels in the system of uncleanliness that corresponds to all the worlds. It also corresponds to the Sfirot as well. Okay? So, Zulumat Zu Asa Elokim. So there are 4 worlds of holiness and 4 worlds of uncleanliness. Okay? So we can understand these 4 worlds through the 4 levels through which we understand God's providence, and through the 4 levels of love, which we've been talking about this whole time. We will begin by discussing the 4 worlds, the 4 holy worlds of Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. And we will start from the bottom with the world of Asiyah. So I had this chart. I was going to actually send it all to you, but I got too busy waiting in the post office. Okay? So that's only open from 3:30 to 6, by the way. Okay? So in any case, we know from the last here, just to give you the little rundown here, okay? Here is the realm of Asiyah, making. In this, we say the idea of good and bad, the mixture here, we say over here is a majority of evil, little bit of good, okay? Majority of evil, okay? And as we go up, you're going to see over here, we're going to see where here in the realm of Yetzirah, it's going to be half and half, okay? Here, you're going to have good and a little bit of evil, and here is going to be all good, okay? That's basically how it goes down to. In other words, the levels of concealment, or we'll call it levels of evil, here is a little bit of evil, here is half-half, and here is mostly evil and just a little bit of good, okay? So here we have already explained above that the first 2 aspects of our experience of God's providence are the 2 aspects of concealment. Okay, we had Hester and Hester betoch Hester, hiding and double hiding. Okay, you should know that they both belong to the world of Asiyah. That's this one right here. Okay, so both levels of concealment go right here. As it is said in the Eitz Chaim of the Ari, most of the world of Asiyah is evil, and the little bit of good that it is in it is so mixed up with the bad that it is impossible to recognize it. Thank you very much. Okay? Why is it like that? I can only say from what I remember learning from the Ramchal in this book called Derech Hashem, The Way of God, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato, that he said, really, God wanted, why did God make this one corresponding this one? This is all about free will. It's all about giving us the opportunity to make the choice, and it has to be a real choice. There has to be a real playing team, okay? So, like we say, there has to be a prostitute in the palace that's trying to seduce the prince, and she's got her job, and that's her job. She's working for the king, but her job has to be her job, right? We're the prince, she's the prostitute, and just like you have holy people, you have that. There has to be free will. It has to be a choice. So the interesting thing was, shouldn't it be a choice 50-50? Hello, that's free choice. Don't give me more negativity and just a little bit of positivity in this world. So he explains that since Adam had sinned with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that made the scales tip, and that's why this realm became mostly bad, mostly negative, and a little bit of positive, okay? But normally, in a normal state, it would be equal, 50-50, okay? But no, okay? So most of the world of Asiyah is evil, and a little bit of good that is in it is so mixed up with the bad that it is impossible to recognize it. Thank you very much. From the consciousness of single concealment of God's face, the suffering and pain experienced by people at this level of awareness of God's providence leads to the experience of the world as being mostly bad. From the aspect of double concealment, even what good there is mixed with the bad and is not recognized as good at all. Even the good, if it would smack you in the head, you'd still complain. Okay? You know people who are complainers? You ever come across any of those? Okay? No matter how good it is, there's always something that twisted and turned and twisted and that. Okay? So, that's the idea. It's attitude, baby. Okay? That's why Rabbi Nachman says, if you see that wicked dude, you gotta, mamish, use every single force, power you have and ability you have to find a little bit of good in him. You gotta find a little bit of good in them. When you find a little bit of good in them, you stick to that little good and you keep your focus on that. And when you do that, you'll actually succeed in elevating the whole person. Okay? The power of perception is the most unbelievable power that we have. The problem is we don't train ourselves to utilize it enough. You don't have to look at the world as falling apart, which a lot of people do. Even my father-in-law, Zichrono Livracha, right? The whole world's falling apart, everything's falling apart. Rabbi Nachman says, no, it's getting better. The world's getting better. What are you talking about, right? It's not like a suit that you wear out in your closet or a dress you got sick of. No, it's getting better. It's just getting better. Attitude, okay? All right? Revelation of God's face begins in the world of Yetzirah. Don't forget, guys, I told you guys about the 4 levels of prayer. And the 4 levels of prayer, actually, in a micro, we are elevating ourselves to get to that. So in getting to that, we use our powers of perception, okay? Even if you do it on the micro, even in your daily prayer, even for 1 millisecond, right? You can go ahead and say, put yourself in the world of Yetzirah. Wherever your thoughts are, that's where you are, okay? There's really good, okay? So the world of Yetzirah is perceived as being half good and half bad. Here the person reaches the first stage of God's revelation, which is the first level of conditional love. So here we started had 2 levels of concealment, and here we start conditional love in the world of Yetzirah. Okay, this is termed transformation from fear of sin. Such a person here is called a Benoni, intermediate person, since he is still half liable and half meritorious, as explained above. In other words, his powers of perception, he is now aware of God's providence in the world. And he is aware that his acts have ramifications and consequences. And so being so, therefore, he straightens his ways, and he wants to come to a higher level of activity. And therefore, all of the sins that he did when he was unknowing, therefore, all get elevated. Even the ones he did on purpose are counted to as being done on accident. In other words, classically called tshuva from awe. The zedonos, the sins done on purpose, are like on accident. The second level of love is also conditional, except that at this level, there's no remembrance of any damage or evil that occurred. This is also true of the first level of unconditional love. Kind of like they're the same, which I thought that they're both kind of very much together. Both of these 2 levels are associated with the world of Bria. I should have my pen here to write it down. God willing, I'll take a snapshot and send this to you. So in the world of Bria, you kind of have 2 forms of love, of connection to God. One is conditional, but it's conditional in the form of you're receiving so much good from God, you don't even have any recollection, not even a recollection, nothing bad happened in your life, okay? But you also come to the unconditional love of God, because God, you see who God truly is, okay? And there, in that realm, the Eitz Chaim tells us, it's mostly good and a little bit of evil. And the small amount of evil within it is not recognizable as such. You can barely recognize it, okay? Interestingly enough, there's the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, brings out in this other sefer that he brings called Das Tevunos. And in Das Tevunos, not Derech Tevunos, the way of understanding, I think it is. I don't know how to translate it. He explains that in this world, the body, which is really just the garment, the body is the host, it's the majority, it's the dominant, it's the balabayit, it's the owner of the house, and the soul is just a guest. It sits in the corner and maybe you feed it. Maybe you'll give it something to drink. And then, in the next world, however, just to give you the cosmic spectrum, the soul is the balabait, the soul is the host, and the body is a guest. The body does exist. We do believe in the revival of the dead. And the revival of the dead is necessary to have some element of physicality because it keeps us a creation. So you'll call the body evil. I don't know if you call it that, but you'll call it the aspect of concealment, right? So in the next world, so then the body, you can relate to a little bit of concealment, and that's what he's calling evil here. I just got to throw this out at you. It's a very dynamic word, evil, if you think about it. In Hebrew, evil, listen to this, is ra. Resh ayin. Okay? Ayin. You gotta say your ayin right. Okay? Not ayin. Ayin.